the alarm goes off. You reach for it before you're even fully conscious, silencing it on instinct. For a moment you lie there, hoping the tiredness will lift, that the few extra seconds of stillness will somehow restore what the night didn't. It doesn't. You get up anyway, because you have to, and you move through the first part of the morning with a familiar heaviness in your body and a fog behind your eyes that the coffee helps with only slightly. By mid-morning, you're functional. By afternoon, you're already counting the hours until you can stop. By evening, you're exhausted again, and you go to bed telling yourself that tonight you'll sleep better, that tomorrow morning will be different, and then the alarm goes off again. And it isn't. This is one of the most common and most quietly demoralizing experiences in modern life. Waking up tired every day, regardless of how many hours you slept, regardless of whether you went to bed early or late, regardless of what you tried to change, and the most confusing part isn't the tiredness itself. It's that the tiredness doesn't respond to the obvious solutions. You sleep more, you're still tired. You cut caffeine, still tired. You try going to bed earlier, tired. And eventually you start to wonder if something is just wrong with you, if this is simply how you are now, if this is what your body does. But here's what's worth understanding. The tiredness you feel when you wake up is almost never caused by what happened the night you slept. It's caused by what happened across the weeks and months before it. Waking up tired isn't a sleep problem, it's a recovery problem. And recovery is a much larger and more complex process than most people realize. One that sleep is only a part of, and one that the specific conditions of modern daily life are remarkably effective at preventing from ever completing. To understand why, it helps to understand what your body is actually trying to do while you sleep, and what can stop it from doing it well, even when the hours are adequate. Sleep is not a single uniform state. It moves through cycles, through phases of lighter and deeper activity, and the most restorative work happens in the deeper phases, the ones where the brain clears accumulated metabolic waste, consolidates memory, regulates hormones, and repairs cellular damage. These phases are not guaranteed just because you're unconscious. They depend on conditions, and when those conditions aren't met, the body spends the night in lighter, less restorative sleep, and you wake feeling like the night didn't count, because in the ways that mattered most, it didn't. What disrupts those deeper phases is not always obvious. Alcohol is one. Even small amounts consumed in the evening fragment sleep architecture, in ways that show up as morning tiredness without the person knowing why. Eating late shifts the body into digestive work during hours that were supposed to be dedicated to cellular repair. Temperature plays a role. Light exposure in the evening, particularly from screens, suppresses the hormonal signal that initiates deep sleep and delays the entire cycle, effectively shortening the restorative portion of the night, even when total sleep time looks adequate. But these are the more commonly discussed factors. The one that's least discussed, and probably most consequential, is the activation state your nervous system carries into sleep. This is where things get strange. Your nervous system has two primary modes. One is oriented toward alertness, readiness, and response, the mode you need for navigating demands and managing a life. The other is oriented toward rest, repair, and restoration, the mode required for sleep to actually restore you. The transition between them is not a switch you flip at bedtime. It's a gradual process that takes time, that requires a period of decreasing stimulation and decreasing demand, and that can be blocked if the first mode is still running too hot when you try to sleep. For most people in modern life, the first mode never fully deactivates, not during the day, and critically, not before sleep. The evening hours that should be a transition period, a gentle downshift from the day's demands, are instead filled with content that keeps the nervous system alert, social media that keeps the evaluation system active, news that keeps the threat monitoring system engaged, and the ambient background awareness of everything unresolved that keeps the planning system running. You lie down, you close your eyes, but the system that was supposed to have begun its shutdown hours ago is still running. Sleep eventually arrives because biology is powerful enough to override the activation, but the deeper phases, the ones that require genuine physiological calm, remain partially inaccessible. The night passes, you were unconscious, but the restoration was shallow, and you wake tired. And this isn't a one-night problem. This is a pattern that has been running for months or years. Shallow night after shallow night, each one leaving a small deficit that wasn't fully recovered, each deficit layering on top of the previous one, until the baseline tiredness is so thoroughly embedded that it feels permanent. It feels like your natural state. It feels like you, but it isn't you. It's the accumulated result of a recovery cycle that has never been allowed to fully complete. What most people miss is the role that daytime recovery plays in nighttime sleep quality. The conditions for deep sleep aren't created at bedtime. They're created, or prevented, across the entire day. A day that includes genuine rest periods, moments of low stimulation where the nervous system gets a partial reset, produces a different physiological state by evening than a day of continuous high-demand activity with no breaks. A day that includes physical movement allows the body to process stress hormones that would otherwise still be circulating at bedtime and disrupting sleep architecture. A day with some exposure to natural light, particularly in the morning, anchors the internal clock in a way that makes the evening hormonal transition sharper and more effective. None of these things are dramatic, none of them require a lifestyle overhaul. But their absence, day after day, quietly dismantles the conditions that would allow sleep to actually restore you. There's also an emotional dimension to morning tiredness that almost no discussion of sleep addresses, and it's significant. Unresolved emotional content, the low-grade anxiety that has no specific object, the vague dread about things that aren't going well, the unexpressed frustration or grief or disappointment that hasn't been felt through and released, lives in the body. It creates a background tension that the nervous system has to manage continuously, including during the night. Sleep doesn't resolve what you haven't allowed yourself to feel while awake. It can process some emotional content during certain sleep phases, but when the load is heavy and chronic, sleep works against a background of tension that it cannot fully quiet, and you feel that in the morning, not as a specific emotion, just as heaviness. Just as a sense that the night didn't give you what it should have. This explains why people sometimes wake feeling more rested after a night when something emotional was finally resolved, when a difficult conversation happened and cleared the air, when they finally allowed themselves to feel something they'd been suppressing, when the load lightened in some way before sleep. It's not coincidence. The nervous system, relieved of some of what it was managing, could finally reach a depth it couldn't access while the weight was still being carried. Understanding all of this changes what addressing morning tiredness actually looks like. Because if the problem isn't fundamentally about sleep hours, but about the conditions that allow deep restoration, then the interventions need to happen earlier and more broadly than most sleep advice suggests. The evening matters, but it matters in ways that go further back than the hour before bed. The transition away from high stimulation needs to begin earlier, not with a rigid ritual, just with a genuine reduction in the intensity of input as the evening progresses, less emotionally activating content, less social monitoring, less engagement with things that require evaluation, response, or planning. Not because these things are wrong, but because they keep the activation system running, and the activation system needs time, real time, to downshift before sleep can go deep. The morning is also a leverage point that most people completely waste. The first thing you expose yourself to after waking sets the tone for your nervous system's activation level for much of the day. A morning that begins with immediate immersion in the phone, in messages, in other people's demands, and the world's noise, starts the activation cycle immediately and at full intensity. A morning that begins with something quieter, with movement, with natural light, with a few minutes of genuine stillness before the day's input begins, starts the cycle at a lower baseline. And that lower baseline, maintained consistently, produces a different quality of day and a different nervous system state by evening, which produces different sleep, which produces a different morning. The cycle runs in both directions. Physical movement deserves a specific mention, not as a general health prescription, but as a direct intervention in the biology of morning tiredness. Moderate physical activity, particularly when it happens in the first half of the day, does several things that directly improve nighttime restoration. It accelerates the clearance of stress hormones. It creates a physical tiredness in the body that is categorically different from mental exhaustion and that supports deeper sleep. It reinforces the internal clock's sense of when alertness is appropriate and when rest is appropriate. And it produces a nervous system state by evening that is genuinely ready for rest in a way that sedentary days rarely produce. None of this requires becoming a different kind of person. It requires small, honest adjustments to the sequence of a day, protecting the transitions, reducing the stimulation gradient in the evening, moving the body during daylight hours, allowing genuine pauses rather than filling every gap. These changes don't produce dramatic overnight results. What they produce is a gradual shift in baseline, a slow improvement in the depth of nightly restoration, a morning tiredness that becomes a morning grogginess, and eventually something closer to actually waking up. The shift is quiet and cumulative. It takes weeks, sometimes longer, but it's real, and it comes from addressing the actual problem rather than the surface symptom. The tiredness you wake up with every morning is not a mystery, and it's not a permanent condition. It's the output of a system that has been prevented from completing its natural recovery cycle for a long time, and systems that are given the right conditions, consistently and patiently, tend to do what they were designed to do. Your body wants to restore itself. It has been trying to every single night. It just needs the conditions to finally succeed. That's not a dramatic thing to build. It's a daily thing, a small thing, a patient thing, but it's the thing that changes the morning. If this felt familiar, comment "Wake up tired." It helps me know this is something more people are silently dealing with.